Kia ora tātou whānau. I have the privilege today of being able to meet and have a korero, a discussion with Meng Foon. Meng Foon is the Race Relations Commissioner of New Zealand. Prior to this, he served as the Mayor of Gisborne for about almost 19, 20 years. Meng is fluent in Māori, English, Cantonese, and he has been a wonderful advocate for human rights and also for better race relations here in this country for a long time. Meng is someone that I highly regard and is very much respected here in Aotearoa. We will talk today about obviously radicalisation and extremism, but we'll be looking at racism as well. And Meng will impart some of his wisdom, his knowledge, and I'm hoping that you all enjoy. So with that, let me introduce you to Matua Meng Foon. Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou family. At this stage, I wanted to welcome our Matua, rangatira, and mihi out to Meng Foon, who is the Race Relations Commissioner for New Zealand. Someone that I hold in high esteem and is held in high esteem by many New Zealanders or many people from Aotearoa. And so in the first place, tēnā koe Matua, thank you for coming here today. And just to get things started, I'm going to offer a karakia, and I'll do it very quickly. And for those who are listening, a karakia is a sort of a statement of intent. It's a well wish. It's our desire to move forward, and we connect ourselves to those which are beyond. And it's an important aspect in terms of our Māori culture. So with that, let me go ahead. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga. Kia mā kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, he aki ana te atekura, he tio, he huka, he hau, te he mauri ora. Kia ora. So with that, Meng, in the first place, thank you for coming again. And I've got a few questions, and as we discussed earlier on, the theme of these podcasts are to address radicalisation and extremism here in Aotearoa and within this region, within the South Pacific, Australia, and I guess one of the big questions I've got to begin with, and it's an experience I had at the beginning of this year. I observed the Wellington riots or the Wellington protests, sorry. And we had a number of people come to Parliament, and these groups of people, they have a right to protest. They came with various different ideologies and concepts and ideas. And one of the things that sort of took me by surprise is that with these ideologies, we have people which, from a Māori perspective, are on one side of the spectrum, but we also had the far right. And what concerned me, and I spoke to some of the protesters and I observed it, is that I found that there was a merging of the ideologies that came together for one common enemy, which was, anti-vaxxing or anti-mandating. And I, in talking to some of the Māori that were there, I said, you do realise that the people on this side, in terms of the far right extremists, they've been participating in speech, which is quite harmful to you and to the people which are in your whānau. And how do you address that? And the phenomena I saw was people just coming together for a common cause. And so my first question to you, Meng, is that what's happening? How did that happen? How do we have ideologies that combine? And when we think about hate speech and we think about the potential hurt that people direct towards one group and they come together, what's your take on this, Matua?
Yeah, tuatai Gareth, tākene mihi kia tau mō tēnei iwi for this conversation that we're having. Awesome to be with you. I think at the end of the day, we're just humans, and we gravitate towards common issues, common causes. And sometimes you can have warring neighbors. But if one of the neighbors actually has a fire and their house is burnt out, the other neighbor may find compassion in their heart to actually provide them with a bit of shelter or food, a couch. I remember during Cyclone Bowler in 1988, 87, 88, where there was a huge flood, and there were a few people that hadn't talked to each other for a long time, and the Afi was there. They, through humanity, for the sake of supporting each other in need, there was this heart of compassion and a mind of compassion to forgive, but not forgive forever. Sometimes it might be forgiving forever, but just for a short time, they said, "Oh, yeah, no, they need help." Interestingly enough, there was one or two people that actually in the city installed water tanks, and the water supply actually got cut off from the main reservoir in Wainake in Gisborne. So Gisborne didn't have any water, but the only people that actually had any drinking water was these people in the tanks. And regardless who they were that wanted water, even if they didn't like them, they gave them water. So I think there's commonalities in humanity. You had your marches for Te Reo Māori, you had land marches, and you did have some Pākehā people and some Asian people actually joined those marches because they too had affinity with those topics that were important and wanted to be allies and support the cause to actually get justice or to get some action. More particularly those days, it was about land, language, cultural rights, the rights of Māori. And I think, the situation in Wellington, they sort of supported each other, not only in the philosophy, but also in the infrastructure that was there too. If someone wanted a lighter to light their gas stove and didn't have a match or didn't have a lighter, they'll say, "Hey, can I borrow that?" And they'll say, "Oh, yeah." And so, you had more commonalities of philosophy than just the philosophy itself. And but sometimes, like the animal farm, you're there for the common cause, and someone will come along and want to be the boss again, and the whole thing breaks up, and we'll just go back to where we were. Yep, there would be the far right that would say that Māori are getting too much right, not knowing the history that Māori had all the rights at 1840 and before, and then suddenly it disappeared very quickly through the pen, through deviation, through the gun, through the battles, and now Māori only have 4 or 5% of the land. And so I think from a Māori perspective, there are a few, not all Māori were there. We must not generalize this. I mean, there were Māori that were for mandate, for vaccination, and I would say would be the majority of Māori. Some Māori actually went to, and even non-Māori, they went to the protests not only for mandate, but they had some other personal grievances or group grievances that we saw. Maybe it was even 3 waters, maybe it was carbon tax, maybe it was nuclear, maybe it was land rights, Māori rights, all those. They were sort of the mixing bowl of frustration. But you could go there to in front of the parliament and actually say, hey, we have other grievances as well. It's not just a mandate grievance.
Oh, kei te pai mātua. I think it's interesting how you talk about this generalization that we sometimes apply. We see something and we apply it and we define it. And you're quite right. We weren't really thinking or talking about all Māori, but I think it's interesting how you point that out. That sort of segues on to the next question I wanted to ask you, is that, or to have a discussion around this, is that, you know, radicalisation extremism, quite often this is travelling via online mediums at this stage, and that the phenomena of this online reach has had the capacity to reach into people's bedrooms, to reach them in private places and places that they typically wouldn't in the past have heard about, sort of potential extremist messaging or even hate speech. And this is a big concern. And once again, from a, I guess, a Māori, Pacific or minority communities perspective, is that, you know, what danger do you see with the potential for, I guess, not so much the access to online, because everyone has access to online, but extremist messaging and hate speech or radicalization thought process, which are directed towards our people, Pacifica, including minority groups. So what is your take on this, Matua? I mean, how do we sort of address that?
Yeah, I think it's a power drive, and also the governments sometimes, or even families or organizations, actually not listening to the needs of some of the minority or the people that are hurting. These ratification philosophies are not new. They go back centuries. Through religion, through wanting to rule. I've just had a look at a YouTube just recently, and it's called the Britain's bloodiest dynasties, and it goes back to Henry II in 1126 or something like that, and just the maneuvering of power and oppression and all those sort of manipulative things that actually happen, and fear, creating fear also. But coming back to nowadays, you know, even with our gangs that were set up back those days, it was because there was no whakawhanaungatanga. You know, the Mongol mob and the Black Power, they really started off because the dispersing of families from the rural areas to the city, the big urban drive back those days, and you know, there was no place to find solace. There was no organized Māori marae or hapu in those areas, and they just found solace in another area. Someone else actually cared. Unfortunately, the use of crime was one of the vehicle of survival. Now, you know, the interesting thing is that the balance of radical extremism and violence is actually not quite balanced by the artificial intelligence of peace, safety, and well-being and togetherness. And nowadays, instead of people reading books about these sort of things, the computer is actually reading us. They're reading every sentence that we actually have. They know how slow. They know what we're looking up. They actually know more about us than we know about ourselves. And they direct that information to us if we're interested in, so I'm interested in tiny homes at the present time. And I get inundated from Trade Me and the internet on tiny homes. And but if another group of people that were concerned that I was looking at too many tiny homes, they would ensure that they actually had the hashtag of tiny homes and actually present to me renting or bigger homes or build new homes. And that's the same with extremism and violence and ratification, that there is not enough hashtags to actually redirect people to the good, the safe, places where you can actually find support. In some places around the world, they actually get people that actually have been in the realm of ratification, and actually face to face they say, look, nearly knock on your door and says, look, I used to be like this, and this is what it was like, and I regret it, and I just want to share with you my story. I think there's also parts in the world where they actually teach extremism and violence and ratification as well, in a soft way, so people actually get an introduction of it and don't get sucked into it, so that they are aware. It's no different to the teachers telling us, if anybody gives you a lolly on the side of the road or gives you a ride, don't take it, because there's going to be danger. And so when the kids are aware of that type of scenario, they are aware, and they will tell other people that, oh, there was this person that actually stopped on the side of the road and offered us lollies, miss. And so the same with ratification, and also extremism and violence, and anything really, even drugs. If someone's, we just need to be aware. And I'm actually quite proud, of our country at the present time, that we're actually talking about racism. In the last 3 or 4 years, it's really come out, when Taika Waititi was posed the question, is New Zealand racist? And he said, we are racist as if. And so, and that shocked the country. People didn't want to, I don't think people really wanted to admit that. We are a subliminal silence type of racism in New Zealand, where in Australia they're a bit overt. In other countries they might be a bit overt, but we're very silent, covert type racism. And we see that in the reports that have come out from the Equal Employment Opportunities Commissioner, where 30% of our workforce receive some sort of discrimination, whether it's sexual, racism, or some other form. And people with LGBTQI and disabilities are up to 60%. So we actually live in quite a toxic community, unfortunately, but fortunately it hasn't blown up into violence. And I would say one of the calming factors of Aotearoa, Gareth, is actually Māori. When we look at what Māori has gone through in terms of especially the suppression of language, the taking of land, the Tohunga Suppression Act, even to the time of Tūhoi, where the police raided just only maybe 10 years ago. I just got to take my hat off to Māori, that they are fighting the passive fight. They're bringing their topics passively to the Crown. Dame Whina Cooper marched from the north, probably up your way in Ngāti Hine, all the way down to Parliament. You had the Tamatoa, who brought the language protests. You had the Tiriti of Waitangi claims. All of those have been passive. Motu Gardens, the only people that were violent was actually the Crown. They actually sent the police and says, hey, get those people off, So we got to be mindful that the Crown, the government, can also incite violence and extremism in our communities through laws. I mean, those days they used to have suppressive laws against Chinese people, poll tax, not able to vote, not able to do this and that, and didn't have the same rights as Pākehā people. And one of the inciting violence incidences was in Haining Street in Wellington, where this guy went and shot a Chinese person just because he was Chinese for no other reason. And you used to have the committees set up. They were called White League committees, and they were there to actually purge and get rid of the Chinese people and lobby the government. And we just got to be mindful of these things, that history can actually repeat itself. And the March 15th, the murder of the Muslims, our latest terrorism event, was actually perpetrated, because the Crown was actually looking at all these Middle Eastern people coming into New Zealand, especially with the event of March 11th, and saying, oh yeah, we got to keep an eye on these, and we got to spy on this one and spy on that one, and didn't even look at the white supremacist type people and what are they doing. So the government needs to be aware of this thing. I'm sure they're aware now, and hopefully they're actually actioning this. But this is quite a long conversation that we can have on this type of topic. But this is some of my views anyway.
Oh, kia ora mātua. I think this concept of these algorithms, directing us towards or the hashtags and channeling people into looking at things is a dangerous sort of concept. But that by itself we could go on for days. But I think there's some really interesting things that you said, and if I get it right, from a Māori perspective, and having worked in China for many years and understanding the concept of guangxi, and very close friends up in China in terms of the work that I've done, is that there's always this concept of the whakawhanangatanga, establishing relationships and building relationships, and in Māori we talk about something called kanohi ki tukanohi, which is face to face. And it just made me think when you were talking, is that we do have the far right. We've got some very strong ideologies. Is there room to basically sit down with these groups of people, if it's possible, and have an open discussion with them to hear them out? As hateful and as disagreeing as it might sound, and potentially hurtful, is that something that has ever been considered, or is that something that is too far to sort of even think about? What are your thoughts on that, Matua?
Yeah, there's always room for conversations, and it needs two willing partners. And from my office, we're always keen to facilitate those conversations, or even have them directly if people don't feel safe about those. I always like the Oxford and Cambridge debates that they actually have in public, and you have one group of people with one ideology and another group of people having the opposite ideology. But at the end of the day, and really is about information and sharing and actually understanding. I'm really pleased that for once in 2023, after nearly 170 or 160 odd years, that we're actually going to teach New Zealand history in its rawest form, the good, bad, and the ugly. And we should, as definitely as parents, should not have fear of any influence of history that could be taught that might be radical, that might incite violence or extremism in Aotearoa. I think our children will just soak it in like a sponge, and they will get to understand the nuances of different philosophies and why did it actually happen those days, in terms of not only Māori history, but Chinese, Indian, Jewish, Indian, Pakistan, whoever has come into our country. We all have a duty to actually share the history and our culture that actually has created the diverse communities in Aotearoa. I'm looking forward to that day. I know that Māori are active. We just had the 1 year anniversary of the Dawn Raids at Ngāti Whātua. And Ngāti Whātua and the Dawn Raid people, Pacific people, have actually signed a memorandum of understanding that they too are working together to eradicate racism, but also to share the history between the two people. And they acknowledge Ngāti Whātua. They said, ko whakarite Ngāti Whātua he whenua mō tātou ngā whānau o te moana ni a Kiwa, which means Ngāti Whātua facilitated land and a home for the Pacific people. And it was interesting to hear from Ngāri Mubrea, the chief executive of Ngāti Whātua, that he said, you know, Ngāti Whātua knew that Pākehā were going to come. So out of the 80,000 acres they had, they offered 3,000 acres to the colonizers to actually settle in Tāmaki Makaurau. And wholly within a few years, they had zero, you know, from giving 3,000 acres of kindness and to having zero, and now only having a few hectares of takapo. And so there is room to have a conversation, and I haven't been asked to have a conversation with any of these groups. Maybe they wish to, maybe they don't. I know that we get a lot of mail in the info line at the Human Rights Commission that people do not like me. They challenge my notion of that we are living in a Māori country. They challenge the notion that the tiriti is not is nothing. They challenge the notion that, oh, why are Māori actually getting all this? And what is your knowledge of that? So, but that's a few. It's a few. Again, you know, we get a few. And I know that I send them the information that I have in terms of the history that I know. But I always say, look, there are some people that I can't change. They will hold hard and fast to them. And I will note that, okay, you have your right to actually say what you say. As much as it is sour and kawa to many ears in Aotearoa, you have that right because we have the freedom of speech as long as you don't incite violence. And you know, there are two H's I have in my thing. I said, well, for those people that you know, that are good people in Aotearoa, they probably go to heaven, and the other ones might go to hell. So that's my general set. It's very hard to actually change people, Gareth. But I try and influence the people on the margins and consolidate the people that are genuinely trying to be allies and supportive to the many causes in Aotearoa. And I must say, you know, our whole philosophy, especially in the perception of Muslim people, have actually, I reckon that's had a huge U-turn since 9/11. It's only since 9/11 because Muslim people have been here in New Zealand for maybe over 100 years as well. And they too have, you know, people didn't even know when they read the occupations of these people that, oh, I didn't realize that you were my baker, my dentist, my lawyer, my mechanic, my barista. You know, they didn't know that. They thought, oh, they look, you know, they look foreign, but they didn't know that they were Muslim. Yeah, but other than women that wear the hijab and other wear that they wear, well, that's obvious. And post 9/11, they really got abused.
Oh, kei te pai mātua, and you've just raised some really big things there in that, and it sort of for me leads into sort of that question about hate speech, difficult speech, and then freedom of speech, and how the government has an impact on that. And you know, we hear in the US, everyone, one side quite often talking about this protecting the freedom of speech at all costs, and it's their definition. And then you hear another group saying, well, you know, when freedom of speech becomes a very deadly, toxic, and dangerous thing for people, we need to address it. And so there's that hate speech, difficult speech, and freedom of speech sort of dialogue going on. And I guess if we think about, you know, what New Zealand's doing right now, Aotearoa, in terms of responding to that, I know that you know, in the last, say, at the beginning of this year, you mentioned that you felt the government hadn't done enough or weren't moving quick enough to get these things sorted. You know, and things could have changed by then. But what's your take on this, Matua, about this concept of hate speech, difficult speech to freedom of speech? Where is the balance, and how do we deal with that phenomena?
It's actually quite interesting. Hate speech, difficult speech, and difficult conversations, they're actually quite well moderated by our community. Our community is a big watchdog or watch group out there that actually says and comes out in the media and social media that this is not acceptable. It's actually quite interesting that I've had a few incidences of people saying disparaging things about Māori people and other disabilities people, and they've been caught on in videos and that sort of stuff. And the amount of the amount of banging or response from the general public through Facebook causes the perpetrator to be stressed out. It's sort of like a reverse thing. You think you're tough, but goodness, you're not as tough as the collective majority that do not tolerate your insistence or the person's insistence in being nasty. I'll just give you a couple of examples. You know, we've noticed that in one of the breweries, the boss of the brewery says a disparaging thing about Māori on Facebook. It probably only took him 10 seconds to type it out under a couple of beers, and he said it. Well, within a day, Gareth, that business lost 90% of its turnover. The supply chain of supermarkets and stores and bars and other outlets that actually sold his produce, sold his beer, says, no, that's not our philosophy. We don't want to be part of that. And so that was a big lesson to all the shareholders and the stakeholders involved. They actually said, mate, you can't be the chief executive. You've got to go back. We're going to buy you out. You've just ruined our business. You know how many multi-million dollars it was that it came to zero. The person that actually said something silly about Nadia Lim, you know, in the newspaper I read, within a week, he lost that company lost $57 million off the share market. Now, $57 million for a couple of words is not worth the paper that is written on. So just be aware that when you are a perpetrator and people find out that, you know, any sensible employer would generally type your name into the internet and see what happens. Not only that, just because one is tough, that they can say these things, but mate, people do have families, they do have children, and they do have friends, and they do have workmates. What do they think about you? You know, suddenly, even if you lost half of your mates, that's terrible. The kids that go to school and says, your father did this, and now the kids are feeling under pressure at school because they're going to get it in the neck. So Andrew Little when March 15th happened. This is not nearly 3 years ago now. He said, we are going to reform and strengthen our hate speech legislation. Well, to date, nothing, zero. Nothing has been done because the government is being too political. They're feeling the pinch from the minority that says that hate speech is okay. I'm saying look, hate speech, difficult speech, whatever speech it is part of the free speech, right? I could say nasty things to my neighbor here and they will hate it. But I have the right to say that, unfortunately. I don't, and well, I might not, I might too. But however, I need to ensure that I don't incite violence, right? I don't incite the mob mentality that in other countries have when you're protesting or something, that suddenly people start burning buildings and rioting, as we've seen in some cities in America, in Britain. That is a terrible situation, and so that needs to be clamped down quite quickly. In actual fact, since hate speech legislation has come in, and there's only been 2 cases that have been found guilty in the courts after all these years. I don't know how many years hate speech has been in legislation in Aotearoa. I would say at least 20, but definitely there has been very few cases that have passed the threshold. There are, so at the Human Rights Commission, we deal with the sub-threshold stuff that haven't actually reached the taumata of hate speech. But we do try our best to facilitate, talk about things, and so people get to understand that, what they're saying. Why do you have to be nasty? Unless you are a nasty person right through. Generally, a lot of these, some of them are actually doing this taunting of hate in a covert operation. They go at night and deliver mail to these mailboxes and talk about the big thing is about Māori. I don't know what attracts people to this, but I think it's about the perception that you may lose power. I was told a little while ago, be aware of the Illuminatis. I said, what are those people? I didn't even know about them, But I had a look and they said, oh no, the Illuminatis are controlling everything, probably like the Rockefellers and all that sort of stuff. And I said, well, I bought my house and I didn't have to ask those Illuminatis to buy my house or become the mayor. I became the mayor not because of the Illuminatis. Hey, so I said, I think you're talking through a hole in your head. You just need to get these stupid philosophies out of your mind, mate. And so I said, look, I'll tell you what, I'm going to pick up this pen and I'm going to write something, and I bet the Illuminati can't stop me writing what I'm going to write. And so, that some people are just fanatical in their beliefs sometimes. But I must say that, there are good beliefs as well nowadays, especially with religious beliefs, or you believe in the All Blacks, or thank God they won, or you believe in the Warriors. I just read in the paper today that people are still going to the Warriors games, even they have not won for a long, long time. People go to ballet, they go to many other sports, they have their hobbies. So I think inherent in each and every one of us, we have a genetic disposition to actually be really faithful or something to something, whether it's a philosophy, a sport, a hobby, like reading books. Some people are bookworms. I can't read books, but so there is room for conversation, and we're having this conversation whether we're having directly face-to-face or we're having it out in the newspaper or in Facebook or social forums that we have, but definitely our communities are engaged. And they, people that stick out the Confederate flag, they get told, no, that's terrible. That's a terrible representative of oppression. Now, I made the mistake in my early time, Black Pete. I don't know if you know Black Pete. It's Santa Claus in the Netherlands, and they get this person. It used to be from the Moors of a person of dark skin from the Moors of Spain, and they would dish out the lollies and the goodies. Since they're struggling to find these people, they paint white people black, and so they did that in New Zealand. And I thought it was a cultural thing, that was the Dutch culture. But then, if I had read a bit deeper, that the Dutch were the biggest slave drivers and sellers and influencers in that realm back those days. And so I just wrote to the people and I said, look, do you mind, do you mind if you don't actually celebrate Black Pete with a black person, but you can still give out the lollies and that? And I sent a note to the Netherlands ambassador, and she wrote back and she said, well, the practice of Black Pete is actually not practiced much in the Netherlands now. It's only this, the immigrants have not been associated with the movements in the Netherlands. And so in actual fact, there's no more Black Pete celebrations as we know it in painting a white person black. In Aotearoa. So, those are small influences that we can actually help people to understand the general. And I don't think they want to actually have people protesting when it's a good tidings day or something, giving out lollies to the kids, people protesting and yelling. I mean, that's upsetting for the children as well. So I'm sure, well, it's little and often. There's a lot of examples through our work that we're actually helping New Zealand to open up these conversations, to be bold, to enable a environment where people can actually have a korero about difficult things. And I appreciate, this forum here, Gareth, that you're giving us a opportunity to discuss difficult things. I think difficult conversations actually have their time. I mean, if we were talking about climate change 30 years ago, probably would have been shot. Definitely if we're talking about LGBTQI back 20 years ago, it would have been rocks thrown through our windows. But everything has its time, and now we're having a mature conversation about racism. We're having mature conversation about drugs and alcohol and marijuana, legalizing. Just imagine, 30, 40 or 20 years ago talking about end of life. We've matured as a country to say, yep, we've witnessed enough people suffering to say, yeah, I think that's their choice if they want to. It's not, we're not forcing people to end their lives, but that's their choice. And so I think we timely have these conversations, and our communities are having these conversations, and there's many people watching every word that we're talking about nowadays, and everybody's critiquing. And I don't mind, criticism from Don Brash or somebody like that. Don Brash says, yep, we should be all equal. Yeah, sure, we should be all equal if you never took all the land. I don't, it's like me going to your house and stealing all your things and says, mate, we should be equal now. Well, yeah, okay.
Oh, kia ora mātua.
You're right.
I had to laugh at that example because a friend of mine a while back, I think we were playing basketball or something, and he's clearly better than I am. But we started cheating on the amount of points that each other had, and And he said, bro, you're taking points off me. I'm not. I says, but I know you are, bro. And so we just had this big argument, and we laughed about it. But it comes back to that concept of sort of equality and equity. And I think that's a really key thing. And I guess as I begin to wind down a little bit now, is that, as Tokyo did say in that clip a few years back, and as you have said, racism is here in New Zealand and Aotearoa. And it's not a phenomena which is just unique to Aotearoa. But one of the things that you have said is that potentially one of the ways that we address it is that we are a very communal, our society is quite connected. We, to a certain extent, are collective. Even European here, or Bākea, have learnt this concept of this collective sort of ownership of being part of Aotearoa. In 2011, I was in Amsterdam, and I'm walking down the actual square in Amsterdam, main Amsterdam, and I hear this gilwe, and I'm thinking, whoa, what's going on here? And I began to hear the haka, and I'm thinking, who's doing the haka here in Amsterdam, 2011? And of course, I started to walk towards the noise, and there would have been about, I don't know, maybe 80 to 100 people there. And they were doing a flash mob haka during the 2011 World Cup. And I must admit, at the time, I sort of, I put a few tears started to well up in my eyes, because as I looked at this 80 to 100 people, there were Pākehā there were Chinese, there were Indian. I couldn't even count many Māori. I probably couldn't count more than 5 Māori in this group of 80 to 100 people. I knew that they were all Kiwis. And what was inspiring, thinking about the treaty for a second, is that I saw many cultures coming together, and what united them was a cultural uniqueness that is Māori, but also that is connected to it the way that we think in Aotearoa. And it really inspired me. And I thought, if this is what the treaty is supposed to look like, then that's potentially what it looks like, where people push away their own views about cultures and that sort of thing. They hold on to the best, but they come together. And that, I guess, leads me to my final question here, is that how do you see racism, for the future within New Zealand? What is your view of an Aotearoa which is inclusive, which is diverse, and embraces culture, and embraces, whether it be Māori, Pākehā, whether it comes back to that concept of kotahitanga or tohonu alignment? Where do you see the future going in terms of how we address racism?
It's a big question, but it's interesting. There are a few people again took to Facebook or online social media about the miraka, tiakaret, dairy milk from Whitaker's. They probably had a Sauvignon Blanc the night before. They might have had some pecorino cheese. They may have had a pasta. They may have had a pizza. They may have had even a chop suey or nori or sashimi. Could have had a Turkish dish, whatever that is, and or a naan bread. So why did they pick on that particular thing? But when you inform them that's of what I've just said, they said, "Oh shit, what did I complain about?" I think and I think we're actually maturing as a country as well. When Hine Wehe Mohi sung the national anthem in Māori, wow, goodness sake, that was a huge furore. And then he chopped the item off the TV. But now we all stand there proudly singing E I Hoa, probably not knowing what it means, because the interesting thing about the translation it is not a translation of God of Nations. It is similar, but if you read the verses in Māori, and I think there's about 10 verses to the national anthem, that the Māori component of it is really embracing. It doesn't talk about war, right? Peace and war, it didn't talk about that. I think the more we are able to create the space for celebration, acknowledgement, and allow people to do what they need to do without perpetrating violence intent, we will live in a nation of fine, great example of nationhood, being proud to be New Zealanders, Aotearoa. I firmly believe that New Zealand will end up either having a double banger name, Aotearoa New Zealand. That's happening now on government letterheads and government speech, and a lot of organisations are just putting in Aotearoa. I think the beauty thing about it is that we have a, even our generation of 60s and under, they too are saying, yeah, why not? And our children, when they learn the New Zealand history, they say, yeah, we're not going to put up with any of that other rubbish. We're going to be together. We're going to look after our mates. We must ensure that there is equity and equality. There are groups of people that do need equity. They do need support. And, I'm very proud that our Disabilities Commissioner has filled in the Chief Executive role of the Manatū Whaikaha, the Ministry of Disabilities. And, this only a couple of years ago, they set up the Ministry of Ethnic Communities. And so focusing on equity is very important. And getting more, you'll note that in this local government, the number of Asian people, the number of Māori people, the number of Pacific people actually running for local government, wanting to be mayors and councillors and board members is outstanding. So congratulations to those people, because I think people have more confidence now. They can see, oh yeah, Meng's been there, the Guru's been there, other people have been there. Oh yeah, I can do that too. And so by ensuring that the environment is enabling, I see, I'm hoping to live to 80, a little bit over 80, so I can actually personally go and witness the 200th year of the signing of Te Riti of Waitangi at Waitangi. I hope to see you there, brother. And I think in the next, there's only 17 years to go, right? Or 18 years, 17 and a bit years to go. I think in the next 17 years, we will see a huge evolution of Māori participating in our society in a bigger way. They are already very influential now with the small amount of whenua and whairawa that they have and the small population that they have. But you'll notice that many organizations, not only governments, but NGOs and businesses are actually taking on and valuing Māoridom. They're valuing the number of products that are named Māori that are not actually owned by Māori. The number of strategic plans or business plans that are written that have got Māori words in them, Māori values and philosophies in them. It's a lot. The whole school curriculum, everybody in the school, all of their, doesn't matter even if it's a pure Pākehā school, they too have manaakitanga and kaitiakitanga in those sort of things, because I think, New Zealanders are different to other people in the world. And I think we're maturing at a faster rate that we need to actually live together in this wonderful land of Aotearoa.
Oh, tino pai, matua, gee, I could talk to you for days, and I suspect that maybe this is what it's all about, is that we have these discussions on a regular basis so people can, hear the I guess the mauri of what's being said at the same time, and the power behind it, and the mana that's attached to it. So I just want to say, in the first place, just want to mihi out to you and just say thank you for just imparting some of your wisdom and knowledge to us. As you know, whether it's Māori culture or Chinese culture, knowledge is a gift. It's a very powerful thing, and it combats disinformation. It creates more understanding, and it sort of alleviates confusion. We develop knowledge, and we sort of are willing to learn about other people and other cultures. And so I want to give the final sort of word to you in closing. And I just wanted to sort of I just say before that, just say thank you so much. Next time I see you, I won't blow by you. I'll stop and we'll have some kai. And I apologize for last year. I was going through the hotel, but at the same time, I just want to say, Matua, that I appreciate your time. But I guess the final word goes to you, is that I just want to sort of pass it through to you right now. And is there anything else that you would like to share with the people which will hear this incredible discussion that we just had? Kia ora, Matua.
Yeah, there's 2 points. Probably one of the biggest things is actually be nice to yourself as well. Don't bash yourself over the head. Be kind to yourself, look after yourself, but also be kind to your family and look after your family, your immediate family, your wider family. And then you've got your nationality groupings that there is intersectional discrimination amongst races as well. Let's not shy away from that. Chinese, Indian, Maori, Pākehā, for one reason or another. And be kind. One of the biggest things, one person did ask me, why do you do this, Meng? And I said, look, I have great hope. I have great hope that our communities can actually live in a civil society where there's peace and harmony and working together. A big goal, obviously, but we must have hope, because if we don't have hope, we won't be able to achieve the micro gains that we gain each day in this journey of betterment. And so I know that, the word kindness is bandied around as if it just flows off a duck off a water's back, and the word love and care and kaitiiki and manakitanga, arohatanga, all those sort of things. But they are real. They are real. And they are much better than the opposite of hate, fear, and not being safe. They are much better. And so I encourage all New Zealanders to have hope and to actually practice betterment in your lives every day. Critique yourself and say, could I have actually done better? I'm sure I could have done better in the interview when I critique myself after, Gareth. But hoi anō, e ngā kaiwhakarongo o tēnei hōtaka ko te podcast, my Gareth, ka nui tāku nei mihi, nui ki a koutou ko whakarongo mai nei, kia tau te rangi Māori kei wāinga tātou. May peace be with us all.
Kia ora, Matua. Have a wonderful day. We'll catch up soon. Kia ora.
Awesome. See you, Gareth. Bye-bye.
Bye.